Hello, and thank you for joining me today. This is Kim, and today we are just going to have a fun time making some backgrounds. I am in need of a number of backgrounds, and I wanted a quick and easy way to do that. And so I'm going to be using some stamping foam. And that may be a tool that is new to some of you, but this technique has been around for a long time. As they say, what's old is new again. And Simon Hurley has made this a new technique for a lot of people. So he did not invent this. I took a class doing this over 10 years ago, and my foam that I used was just like this, except it was blue and about half the size. But thanks to Simon, he's brought this out so many more people are discovering it. So let me show you what we're going to use today, and then we're going to get right into doing this because we're going to first use our stamping supplies, and then we're going to be using some other items too. So we have our stamping foam. We need a heat gun, and I'm going to be using the Heat It tool. Since I have that, you can use your regular embossing tool if you want. So I have both. Because of that, I'm going to use the Heat It tool because the hot air is diffused more. It goes over a wider area than my regular embossing tool. This one it seems hotter just because the air is focused out of this much smaller tip. So either one works. We'll talk a little bit about where to hold it when you're heating up your foam here. We also need some paper, and I'm just going to use white cardstock because I think you can see better on the white what I'm doing, but you can use any color cardstock that you want, and an assortment of inks. I'm going to use Catherine Pooler just because they're bright, beautiful, and juicy, and I'm also going to be using some distress inks as well. And you can see I've been playing because I already come to the show pre-inked. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to use is an embossing folder. You can use any embossing folder that you want. I had a 3D one that was handy, so that's what I pulled out. And I'm going to just pull out one of the two stamping foams. So what we're aiming to do here is make an impression into our foam and then stamp on it. Stamp that impression onto a piece of paper. So that's where we're headed today. One thing I want to tell you up front is whatever you're going to make the impression of, have it ready to go. Don't think, well, I'll heat this up and then I'll figure out what I'm going to make an impression of. This needs to be ready to go, and you're going to see why in just a minute. So I've got all of my pieces ready. On my embossing folder, I have two sides to it. I have the emboss side and the deboss side. And think when you stamp with a rubber stamp, the stamp is embossed to make a good sharp image. So we want to do the same thing with our foam. We want an embossed image. So I'm going to start with the debossed side of my embossing folder. You can use either side, and we'll actually do both sides so we can compare. But I'm going to start with the debossed side because if it's debossed in my embossing folder, that means it will be embossed, so stick up like a stamp on my foam block. So I've got this ready, got my foam ready, and I've got my heat gun ready. So all I'm going to do is heat my foam up, and I'm going to keep this gun about an inch and a half away. I'm going to keep it moving. You don't want to just stop and hold it. You want to move it constantly, slowly, but keep moving it. Otherwise, I'm sure you could scorch the foam. Now, if I was using that other heat gun that's a lot more intense, I would probably hold it a couple inches away because it's a lot hotter. It will work just fine, but just be aware that it blasts out a little more direct line of heat than this one does. So the first couple times, it's going to take me just a little time to heat up my foam. Once we get going, it seems like the foam kind of retains a little bit of the heat, and it doesn't take quite so long. And when I want to test to see if this is maybe ready to go because it doesn't change color or anything, I'm going to just put my finger in there, and if it retains my fingerprint a little bit, I know that it's soft enough that I can go ahead and make an impression. So I'm going to turn my heat gun off, and I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to take this and just lay it down on top of my embossing folder and press. Now, normally I would stand up. I'm not sure that I can. Let me see if I can do that without knocking everything over. And I have much better pressure if I stand up. And we just want to hold it down for 10 to 15 seconds. And then pick it up, and we have a great impression of this embossing folder. So once we do that, then we can actually use this as a stamp. So let me set that aside. Get a piece of paper. Again, you can use any color, but I'm using white just because I think you can see easier what I'm doing. So let's just pick a color here. I'll pick the sea glass. And what I'm going to do is gently, and that's a key word there, gently swipe my ink pad across. Now I can add pressure, but these are pretty juicy, so I don't want to press down real hard the first time, and I don't want to tap, because then if I tap, I'm going to get ink down here in like this flat part. I want to stay on top of the embossed design, and I can turn this around. And if your pad isn't real juicy, you can press a little harder. But again, it's better to swipe it several times with a light touch and try to stay on top of that embossed image. I've got a little bit of ink down below, but that's okay. All right. Remember, we're making backgrounds here. We're not making a fine piece of art. Okay, so you can put your paper down and then take this and stamp like a stamp. I find that kind of hard because I can't really see where my paper is. So for me, it's easier to just lay my paper on top, and then I take another piece of paper and lay it over, because otherwise I really have an inky mess. This isn't bad compared to a few days ago when I was playing. And then I'm just going to kind of massage it. I don't have to use a lot of pressure, just a firm rub like you're massaging it. And then we'll pull this up. So you can see the ink around the edge. So this is why I try to do this with this piece of paper, so I'm not quite so inked up. And there I go. I've got my paisley. Now there's still some ink on this. Not a lot, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put another piece of paper down and see if I can get some of that ink up. And it will be a lot lighter, and that is okay. Sometimes when you have a really, really dark ink, you can get a couple of really good impressions. Okay, so let's see what this one looks like. So that's really light. That's fine. We're just going to set that aside. We're going to work on that some more later. Now, when I do these, I don't just say, okay, one time, and then let's move on. I can change ink colors. Now, if I know I'm going to do that, I would always start with my lightest, because I don't want to get this wet right now, because if I get this wet, like say with a baby wipe, my ink's really going to be all over the place. So I'm just going to wipe this off, because we saw how light that came off, but I'm still getting a little ink. And if I stay in the same color family, I'll just use a little darker color, and that won't affect my ink pad. Now, I wouldn't take a yellow one and go across this, or I'm going to be picking up more green ink on my yellow pad. But I'm going to use Uptown, which is a little darker version of Sea Glass, so that won't be a problem. Now, if I wanted to do something, say like a pink or a totally different color family, I would make sure that this is cleaned off good. I'd wipe it some more with a dry cloth, or I could press it on paper. And if nothing's coming off, then I'm pretty safe just to totally change colors. So, let's do that. Let's use our pink, our party dress. And I'm going to just swipe over this. Again, I want to use a light touch. And I don't have any green coming off, so I'm good with that. I'm pressing a little hard there in the center, but we'll be okay. All right, so let me take a piece of paper, lay that down. And just rub that real good. Just give it a little massage. And then we'll pull this one up. And there we go. And you can see I have a little more pink down where it's flat, but that's okay. So this is a background. And I would make several of them. I could re-ink it with the pink. I could get another light one. I wouldn't just do a couple and then move on. Since you have a good impression, put several colors, get as many backgrounds as you want off of this. We're going to get rid of this design and we're going to make an impression of the other side of the embossing folder, but I'm going to clean this up good before I reheat it. I'm going to guess that the ink would probably just kind of seep down into the foam and kind of bake in there. I don't know. I haven't tried it, and there is a reason. As we move forward here, you'll see why I clean these, and it doesn't take much because this is water reactive. Even though at first it may spread that ink around, don't panic. Just get out another baby wipe and keep just rubbing it down until you get all that ink off. And over time, the inks will stain. Even though this looks nice and clean, the ink will stain. This is the other side, and I can see a little bit, it's stained a little bit, but it doesn't hurt anything, and this ink isn't coming off. And now I won't contaminate any other pads, and I won't get ink on whatever other piece that I'm trying to get the impression of. So I'm going to get this ready again. This time we will do the emboss side, so we'll have the opposite effect on this, but first we need to get rid of this design. So I'm going to take my heat gun again, do the exact same thing, just slowly go over this, and you'll see this design start to disappear. Now, the more you sit and do this, the more designs you make in one sitting. The design seems to disappear faster because the foam block is starting to retain some of the heat. So it doesn't really take that long once you get going. But it's fun to be able to make your own stamp, and you may think, well, I already have the embossing folder. What do I need this for? This just gives us another way to use our supplies. Maybe we want the design stamp, but we don't want all the texture for some reason from the embossing folder. And in just a few minutes, we're going to be making stamps of textures that aren't from our paper crafting supplies. Okay, so that is gone. And I've got my embossing folder ready. So let me turn this over, and I'm going to press this in there. And again, I'm going to try to stand and not drop anything. And I'll just get a much better impression if I can put a lot more weight on it than just sitting. And again, hold it for about 10 or 15 seconds. And I just kind of guesstimate. I don't actually time that out. Okay. And now we've got the reverse side. And I didn't press very evenly right there, but that's okay. Now, if you just thought, oh, that just didn't come out at all, just stop, get the heat gun out, and reheat that up, and you can start over. but we're going to call that good for right now. So let's take this color, Flirty Fuchsia, and let's make another bright, colorful. I really should use maybe a little lighter touch. I kind of have a line there, but I'm not going to worry about it. Don't try to take and clean that off, because I can tell you from experience, you'll probably just make a bigger mess. All right, that's good and inked. So let me take my paper and I'm just going to lay it on top. And if I don't get it on there perfectly, I don't panic, because I know I'm going to trim it down anyway. And just give that a good rub, a good massage. I do hold it down with my other hand because I don't want the paper underneath to be moving around on top of my foam there. Okay, so let's pull that up. And we've got a pretty lavender design. Now you can see, even though it didn't look so great here, it came out pretty good on this. So the other thing I'm going to do is, I know I've still got plenty of purple color. This is really, really light. I don't know that. Let's see here. I don't have another one. We're going to just put this on top. I love to layer these. I'm not going to try to line it up. But even if I have just a little bit of that previous color come through, that will be great. So let's just see. This is what I love to do, is just layer these up. Okay, so you see a little bit of both the purple and the green there. So I can layer this up again and, keep going till it's something you like. Again, I would make probably more of these in one sitting. I wouldn't just make one and say, oh, time to clean it up and move to something else. But we are today, because I want to show you several different ways to use this. So I'm going to get a baby wipe out again. And this is a dark purple, so this is probably going to go all over the place. Don't panic and think, oh, I'm really making a mess. Just keep rubbing it. And it will come off. You can see the gray starting to come out again. There we go. And you may choose not to do this, but again, I'll show you here in just a minute why I choose to get this off. Especially if I want to use a lighter color, I don't want to risk contaminating another ink pad for one. And I really don't want ink on some of the items that I'm getting the impression on. Okay, so that is pretty clean there. So let's get another item out that we want to take an impression of. This time I'm going to use a cover plate die, and I'm going to use the LDRS plaid cover plate die number 2. So I have either side I could use, but why not use the side that has all this decorative stitching on it? So I'm going to lay it down here. It's ready to go. We need to get rid of this design. So get my heat gun out. And we'll just start going over it slowly. And we'll watch that design disappear. And you can pretty much use anything that you want to make a design in this foam, except if it's sharp. You don't want something that would actually cut into the foam. Now this is obviously not sharp enough to cut into the foam. But if you did have something with sharp pointy edges, I would not use that, because this is not a self-healing foam pad. It would retain that cut mark if it got cut. Now you can see pretty quickly that design is disappearing. And probably one more pass and we'll be ready to go. This time we'll use some Distress ink. Now my Distress ink pads aren't as juicy as my Catherine Pooler ink pads. And, that's okay. They still work. I would just use a dye ink. I would not use pigment on this. You could, but I think that would be very, very messy to clean up. So the dye ink cleans up pretty good. And there's something else we're going to do with the dye ink here that I'm going to show you in just a sec. So my image is all gone from before. So let me turn that off. And just press this into it. And again, I'm going to stand up. Give that a good press. This time I'll try to remember to press more in the center as well. And you can move your hands around just as long as you don't move what's underneath it. Okay. Let's see how that came out. That came out great. And I even have it on there fairly straight. If you don't like something, or say it's really, really, like if it came off crooked like that, you could use it like that, or you can just heat it up again and start over. So let's get some white paper out again, and let's see. What do we want to use? I just seem to have kind of blues and greens out today. So let's use Mowed Lawn. Again, this isn't as juicy, near as juicy as Catherine Pooler. I need to re-ink some of these, but this will still work. I'm going to lightly just rub over this so you can see it's not near as dark. So I can give it a little more pressure. And I do like to go from all directions just to make sure I have ink over the whole image. Again, don't pat, just swipe. And I'm going to do something a little different this time. I could lay my paper on here and do just what we did with the Catherine Pooler inks, but we know that Distress ink reacts with water. Now, so does Catherine Pooler, so I could do the same technique with Catherine Pooler. I'm going to actually give this a light spritz with water. I don't want to make it soaking wet, and in fact, I'm going to move this off camera and do it because I just want a light spritz and I don't want water all over my mat. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's just a little bit of water on there, very fine mist. I'm going to lay my cardstock on top, give it a rub. Now, I could have just picked this up like I did the Catherine Pooler ink, but this will give us a little different effect this time since the ink does react with the water. Okay. And now you can see how it transferred over, and you might be able to see where it's more spotted, and that's because of the water. You can see up here I did a better job of spritzing that. So let me give it another spritz. I still have ink on here. It will still be light, but why not clean up and get another image off at the same time? So let me put this back down. And I'm going to rub that good. And we'll see what we come up with this time. And I do like the lighter images. Everything doesn't have to be super dark. And a lot of times on the lighter images, that's what I use to layer up a different impression, a different image on it. Okay. So I have a lot less ink down here, but that's okay because I can use this one. We'll be doing something else with this one here shortly. Let's add another ink color to this. I don't want to use a baby white because a baby white puts a lot more moisture on this than just spritzing it. So I'm going to take my towel. I do want to clean this off just to get as much of that ink off. And there'll be a little, I won't be able to get it all off. I won't have it clean like if I used a baby wipe. But if I put a baby wipe on here, I can just assure you from firsthand experience, you'll just have an inky mess all over the place. And if I wanted to make sure that that was, pretty clean, I can just rub a piece of paper and it's not coming off. I'm going to put another dark ink on. It won't be green. Now, I wouldn't take like a yellow or a light pink and then rub that ink pad because you will pick that green up. It's still on there. But I'm not going to hurt my pad if I pick like another darker green or just another dark color, even if it's from a different color family. So this is Chip Sapphire. I see I need to re-ink this pad, but I'll have a lighter effect, and I'm okay with that. This is a dark ink. And I can just wipe it in several different directions, and I'll have more than enough ink. Okay, so now let's do this. I could just do what we've been doing, lay a piece of paper on there, pick that up. But I'm going to go back to, let's do the pink. There'll be more contrast. Because this was a pretty dark impression. And let's spritz it, because that's kind of a neat effect. So let me take it off here and give it a little spritz from a distance. I can see I have a way more water over there than I do down here, but that's okay. These are just backgrounds. So let me put this down and rub it. And that ink will affect not only the Chip Sapphire Distress ink, but it's also going to affect that pink ink from Catherine Pooler, because remember, Catherine Pooler's inks react with water too. So let's see what this looks like. A lot more depth to this one. Let's just compare it to the green here. So I love to build it up. This has so much more interest than this. And I could use this plain because maybe I'm going to put a lot of die cuts on this or something. But I love to be able to build up the backgrounds. And especially like a lighter one like this one would be an ideal one to do because it's so light in the background. So this is where you can just start playing. Let me try this. Let me try that. And again, I would just put another dark ink on this. I wouldn't put a real light ink on it now. If I wanted to do yellow, I should have started with yellow. I can just wipe it off and then add another ink. Like I could add another Catherine Pooler ink if I wanted and just keep playing with it. But I want to show you what we can do with this using non-paper crafting supplies. So while I ink or clean this ink off, start looking around your room and look at the texture of various things in that room and what could you make an impression of. And that's what I really love about this foam is I can make an impression of anything. And at first you may say, well, I don't really have anything. You're going to be surprised of everything that you have in your house that you can make an impression of. And it doesn't cost you anything to try it. Just try it. If you don't like it, what do? You don't even have to ink this up. You can just reheat it and get rid of that design if you're like, ugh, not what I thought it would be. Sometimes those things you think, oh, that won't be very neat, really turn out to be neat. Now, unless you make an impression of something, of an item that you could never do again, or say you don't own that item, you could keep it on this foam. But if you can do it again, like the dies or the embossing folders, or really anything that you own in your house, there's no need to keep it. Just keep reusing the foam. Okay, so that is cleaned and ready to go. And let me show you what we're going to make an impression of. So I have this glass plate, and on the top it's smooth, but when I turn it over, I have this great debossed image. I can put my finger down there and it's all debossed. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to get it ready, but this is glass, and I'm just going to put this mat down so we don't have glass clanking on glass. And then I'm going to heat this up, and then I'm going to take an impression of this plate. So think about what you have that you can make a unique and original impression of it. Maybe nobody else has. And if it's a pattern that's debossed, that is even better. Don't totally eliminate things that may be embossed, but think about things that are debossed, because that gives us more of a stamp-like effect on our foam. So we'll get rid of this other plaid image. It's disappearing pretty fast now. A couple more passes and then we'll be good to go. And if you sit down with your foam pad and start to do this, make sure you have plenty of paper cut and ready to go. You will be amazed once you get going at how quickly you can make these backgrounds. And if you have a favorite color, make a lot in that color. And then you can just stash them away, use it for a background, die cut it up. Lots of different things that we can just do with these random designs. Okay, that is totally gone. So let me take this, and I'm not going to put it smack dab in the middle. I'm going to put it off to one side here, and I'll press on this because I want the center more towards the bottom. I have used this plate before, and I just love the effect. And I am sitting this time. I'm not standing up, so I don't have quite as much pressure on the plate. Okay, so there we go. We have like kind of like a sunrise type of pattern there. So let's play with this. Get my paper out. And let's see, what color of ink haven't we used? Let's use orange. Since it's sort of like a sunrise, let's try the orange. And we do the same thing, just swipe across. This is a great way to also pull out all your colorful inks that maybe you don't use a lot and just enjoy playing with them. And except for maybe your fingers, this really is not a messy project. So we'll just do this one first, where we just take the old impression of it. We won't spritz it or anything. We'll just lay our cardstock down and give that a good rub. And some of the colors that are really dark, or if your pad is super juicy, you'll get a really dark impression and then a lighter impression, but sometimes it's still fairly dark. So you just have to experiment around with your colors and your inks to get some different effects. Okay. So there we go. Great impression. Now, I am looking at this one here. So let's do this. It looks like I still have quite a bit of ink. I'm going to spritz this because I know if I just lay this on top, this isn't going to be near as dark. So I'm going to give this a little spritz of water. Again, this is Catherine Pooler, so it does react with water. Let's take our paisley this time. I'm not even thinking about, will the colors go together? I just kind of look at the design and think, oh, let me try this one. And we'll see what happens with this. Okay, there we go. Totally different look than just one layer. And they're both neat, just depending on how you're going to use them. And I have no plans for these. I'll put them in my background folder, and then as I need something, I will pull these out and use them. So I could, again, continue with this. I wouldn't just do a couple and move on. I would either put some more orange ink on here or add something else, wipe this off, add another color, something. I would make quite a few of these before I just move on. But I want to do one more, so we are going to move on. Let me just clean off the orange. Now, I have also done this on fabric, and that is another reason that I want to make sure I get the ink off. I had a fabric colored lampshade, and I will show you that. And I tried the foam on that, and it worked. It was great. I heated it up, ran out to the lampshade, and made a great impression. But this is another reason why I want to make sure I get the ink off of this. If you have any kind of like crocheted piece, whether it's a tablecloth or placemat, something like that, this works great on it. But again, you want to make sure there's no ink. I don't want to do it, say, like on a crochet tablecloth and then have this big ink stain on it that I can never totally get out. So just bear that in mind when you're using this. And when I'm all done, I will clean this up good and smooth it out, get rid of the impression so that it's all ready to go for the next time I sit down and make some more backgrounds. Okay, so I was going to do something else specific, but then when I was setting up, I have a bunch of change in a coin jar, and I thought, oh, let me try that. So we're going to try this. I haven't tried this before. We're going to see how it works. So I'm just going to lay these coins down. We'll see how this works. Spread them out. This may be great, or it may not be. But this is what it's all about. Just experimenting, playing around. Guess I'll put those out a little bit. Okay, let's heat this up, and this will be our last one that we do. And we'll see how our coins work, if we like that or not. But one thing I do love is, boy, I can make a stack of backgrounds, either to use as a background for a card base or to die cut up. If I don't like it, I can die cut it up, or just keep layering up until you do get it to a point where you like it. And then once you do, stop. One thing I have thought about doing with the pattern that we just did, and I'm a little far now, but just to heat up the center circle. If I wanted to try to keep the outside, I could just heat up this area where that center circle is, even though it would take out a little bit of the next ring, and stamp something in that center, and that would give me a totally different look with that pattern from the plate. As you play with this, you are going to discover other things that you can do with it to make some unique designs. Okay, so this is just about ready. Do remember just to keep this moving. Even if it's slow, I'm going a little fast. You can go slower, but you don't want to just stop and hold it in one section of the foam. Okay, so we're going to stop with that, and I'm going to press this down, and I'm actually going to stand up again. I don't want to move my foam around because I don't want to move those coins underneath. So I'm going to really try just to press down on this whole foam and not not move my hands around much. And we'll see what this looks like. Okay. So it's not, we'll ink it up and see what we get. I maybe should have held it down a little more, but sometimes it's deceptive. Now these are all embossed, they're all debossed. So they're pressed into it, not embossed. So we'll have a lot more of this flat part, but let's just see. Let's ink it up. We'll move those off. Oh, what color haven't we used? Let's use Uptown because that's a dark color. And it's kind of green like money. So let's try it with this. So I can see some of the heads there. We'll see how this prints out on paper. Oops, I'm kind of making a mess now. I need to slow down a little and use a little less pressure here. Then I won't have such a mess. Okay. Let's take, and I'm going to have a really dark spot right there where I was kind of trying to rush. And let's just rub this. And while I do that, I better clean this up or I'll have this everywhere. Okay. And we'll see how our money turned out. If that was an idea that we're going to like or one that we're going to pass on in the future. Oh, and that actually turned out better than I thought it was going to. We actually have some of those heads in the back of the nickel that show good. So that actually turned out much better than I thought it was going to. I like that. So this is a dark ink. I still have a lot of ink on there because you saw how much I put on. Let's just do one more. Why don't we do it on this one? Let me see what else I've got over here. Oh, let's do this. This is one that needed some improvement. So I'm going to spritz this. I could just put this on this way, but I kind of rejuvenate the ink a little bit if I spritz it. For some reason, I seem to want to be generous with this color, and this is pretty sprayed, not a fine mist on this one. So let's lay this down. But I think you can see that there's really no wrong way to do this. Just have fun. Experiment and play. That's what it's all about. Okay, let's see what this looks like now. So we have just a little bit of that plaid. This is where it was darker, but I still have a really good impression of the coins. But once again, even though you maybe can't see that background a lot, look at the difference. A lot more depth. Just even with that little bit of lime green that was on there from the plaid. So play, play, play. This one I could take. If I like it, I can leave it. Or maybe I'll find something else in a lighter color and I will pick that up. So when I'm done, I will clean this up. I will heat it up again so it's smooth, put it back in its packaging, and then it's ready to go. I want to show you, though, real quickly, the lampshade, just because that was fabric. So this is the first one that I did, so you can see the folds of the fabric came out. Then I did it in a little darker color and spritzed it. I believe this was Rusty Hinge distress ink that I used, and I spritzed it. I love how that came out. And I played with this impression quite a bit. I changed the colors, and then I had a light green impression of some circular things, and then I did the blue over it. So again, you can just keep changing and playing with it. This is from a crocheted vintage piece that I had that was like for a chair cover, for an armchair cover. And then here's some more with that dish. And this is a couple different colors. Use color paper. It works great on color paper. And I use the white picket fence distress ink on the black cardstock. So again, don't limit yourself to just white cardstock, but I just had a blast with that plate, and I just went through lots of different colors, spritzed it, didn't spritz it. This is like a second imprint. So play, play, play. So look how easy it was to make all those backgrounds with one new tool, a foam block, basically, a heat gun, paper, ink, water if you want to spritz it, and of course, don't forget those baby wipes to clean up. So I hope this has provided you some inspiration to look around your house so that you too can make some unique backgrounds and some unique stamps with things that you already have in your house. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you again in a future video.